Hi, I'm Douglas Mason, President and CEO of Rainy Mountain Royalty Corp., RMO, on the TSX Venture Exchange. Rainy Mountain Royalty Corp. is a Canadian-based mineral exploration project generator. The company currently holds multiple property interests in Ontario with joint venture partners and is seeking further joint venture partners for other drill-ready properties in our portfolio. For more information, please visit our website at rmroyalty.com or call me at 604-922-2030.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is Kris Sims, VC Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. Welcome back to the show, Kris.
Thank you for having me on.
Kris, the city of Victoria has a lawsuit you think's pretty frivolous and probably not likely to be successful. What's it all about?
Well, apparently the bean counters and the politicians at Victoria City Hall are considering launching a lawsuit against oil and gas producers. This is, of course, keeping in line with the typical amount of vapid virtue signaling that City Hall has been doing now for a few years, and they are trying to sue oil and gas companies for quote-unquote climate change damage reparations. As we know, this is all usually just part of the way that these folks signal to each other and their friends about how progressive they are and how environmentally friendly they are. But in reality, all it is just environmental extremism, campaigning against the oil and gas sector and trying to do it in a legitimate way. We don't think it's legitimate because, of course, our modern world, especially here in Canada and places like the United States, runs on oil and gas. We are, because of oil and gas, looking around us, every single thing we use and eat and our construction of our homes, etc., are powered by oil and gas. And so for folks who are so well educated and privileged to actually work at Victoria City Hall, including the mayor, Lisa Helps, to turn around and try to sue oil and gas producers, it's embarrassing.
What damage has been done, and can they prove it?
They can't prove it, and they don't know what kind of damage has been done yet. It's in the same spirit as the climate change reparation letters that Victoria City Hall sent out over the last year and a half or so to oil and gas producers around the world. Amazingly, they're also sending these kind of carbon-shaming climate change reparation demand letters saying things like, you produce oil and gas, so you are the cause of climate change, and someday in the future, Victoria could potentially see damage to our edible tubers and plants in our green spaces in Victoria City's parks that is now ringed by million-dollar homes. And these letters, actually, are also going to places like Mexico, Iraq, and Venezuela, because, of course, those places are state-owned oil companies. They're literally owned by the people and governments of those states, of those places. So Victoria City Hall is actually sending a bill, a climate change bill, to the people of Venezuela, saying, send us money for climate change in the future. Meanwhile, the people of Venezuela are literally starving to death, and they have no access to Medicare, and they're selling their own hair and breast milk to get out of the country. They're so desperate to flee. But our city politicians in Victoria saw it fit to send them a letter. Frankly, these sorts of lawsuits against companies like oil and gas companies, they're coming from the same place.
Who's funding these programs to go after the oil and gas industry?
Taxpayers. And it's depressing to say that.
Do we know how much Burnaby and Vancouver have spent fighting the pipeline so far?
That's a great question. We don't know. We know it's in the many thousands of dollars, but I have actually sent in several freedom of information requests to places like the city of Burnaby, and the runaround would make Donovan Bailey blush that I get here.
Uh-huh. So So we don't know how much taxpayers have had to spend on this yet.
No, we don't know the exact amount, but it's safe to say it's an awful lot. It would probably make taxpayers sick.
Is there any chance taxpayers could say, we want that money back? And of course, they'd be suing themselves, wouldn't they?
They would. That's the thing, is no matter how much they turn around and fight City Hall will then use their own money against them to go after them again in court. So it's really one of those very frustrating times when we really need to harp on this and say, folks, I know it's hard. I know getting out on a weekday evening to attend all candidates' debates is a pain, but we got to do it. We need better people running city halls, and we need more accountability at all levels of government, and this is one of the reasons why.
We'll have more with Kris Sims right after this.
Avon Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia, Saskatchewan, and the Yukon. Trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the pink symbol ABN-AF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Avon's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avonresources.com.
Grand Portage Resources recently completed the 2018 drill program on its 100% controlled Herbert Gold Discovery property located in the prolific Juneau Belt in southeast Alaska. Drill results are expected through late 2018. Past drill results included numerous multi-ounce gold assays on multiple veins. Grand Portage trading symbols are GPG on the TSX Venture, GPTRF on the OTCQB, and GPB on Frankfurt. For more information, please visit our website, grandportage.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Kris Sims. Kris, what's your take on Darryl Plecas, the Speaker of the Legislature's report on what he thinks is fraud going on in the legislature by two high-ranking members?
It's very, very concerning. It's several pages. I've read through the vast majority of it. These allegations, and right now they are allegations, they've not yet been proven by law enforcement, are highly concerning. The main thing I find a lot of taxpayers are concerned about here is apparently the severe lack of transparency, oversight, and accountability that's happening within the offices built into the legislature. It's very concerning that some expenses like we're seeing being detailed in the Speaker's report could be expensed and could be paid out. And again, we really need to be careful, and we really need to wait to see what the police say, to see what any sort of other investigators are saying about this. But it's highly problematic. And I think the perception here is a major problem too, and I think a lot of British Columbian taxpayers, no matter who they voted for or what their politics are worried about accountability in Victoria at the legislature, and so with that in mind, we think that we need a full audit done of the legislature. And we mean somebody from completely outside of BC, beyond the Rockies, somebody who has never worked within the BC legislature, who has never worked with people from there. We need somebody like the former federal Auditor General, Sheila Fraser, to come and take a very, very clear look at this, because we need some answers.
Well, also, too, wondering whether they broke any laws or rules. This could be much like the Mike Duffy case and the Canadian Senate, where their rules were so lacking or so foggy that he ended up being acquitted because it was hard to prove he did anything wrong. Is the legislature going to be like that too?
This is one of the things, and I know your listeners are on the up and up, so they'll probably understand the distinction. And as the Speaker also said, he doesn't know if any of these allegations could even be considered to be criminal. These could very well be technically within the rules. The problem is if that's the case, then the rules are bad. The rules are way too wide open. And what we need, apart from, even dismissing the people involved, the actual personalities and people involved, taking a look at just the offices themselves and the lack of accountability, that's the main problem. It's the lack of oversight, the lack of accountability, the inability to have a FOIP a Freedom of Information request put through offices of the legislature. The fact that we can put in a Freedom of Information request to some, administrative assistant in some minister's office, but we can't put in a Freedom of Information request to somebody who's paid this amount of money and who has access to this kind of funding because they're in an office of the legislature, that's a problem. Because every nickel of that is coming from taxpayers of all political stripes, of all walks of life. If it's, no matter who they are, the tax dollars are going there towards Victoria. No matter who they vote for, their tax dollars are going to fund things like this in Victoria. And those taxpayers deserve to know where their money is going and how it is being spent.
Is it true the legislature doesn't have a line-by-line budget, but they just say things like travel expenses, meals?
My understanding is that is the case, and I actually listened in on some of the committee's hearings just before Christmas. They actually sat quite late last year, partly to do with things like we've heard from Speaker Plekis. And apparently, that's the case. They don't have line by line, they don't have full receipts, they don't have the kind of accountability that we're used to seeing now after the Accountability Act passed federally. So after the Accountability Act passed federally, members of Parliament had to be much more clear with where they were spending the money and how, and receipts needed to be produced. But according to some of the people who were sitting around that table I was listening in Victoria, provincially, that hasn't been the case now. That hasn't been standard practice. And that's mind-boggling. I know for most people listening, if you have a job where you need to incur expenses for your work, and then you are then reimbursed for those expenses, you need to produce receipts and evidence or paperwork or something for it. And apparently that's not happening in Victoria, and that really needs to change.
Is this all from the politician feeling of entitlement that they're due all this money or privileges and taxpayers don't have a right to examine it?
This is where I think it rubs a lot of people the wrong way. Again, regardless of what your politics are, left, right, center, whatever, I think a lot of people get really bothered when they see forms of entitlement. So, of course, we all remember the whole famous line from David Dingwall of "I'm entitled to my entitlements," because he had expensed something as small as, I can't remember if it was a pack of gum or Tic Tacs, but it was under $1. It was something like 57 cents. And that really bothered people. And it wasn't obviously because of the 57 cents. It was because it occurred to somebody, to a grown-up, to actually make someone else pay for that. That is where it passes the pale. It goes beyond the pale for a lot of people. And that's when they start saying, you know what? Buy your own gum. Buy your own muffin. Why are you nickel and diming me every single part of your existence just because you happen to have this job? It's not fair. And I think that's what it comes down to. It strikes a lot of people as unfair when they see expenses that they would otherwise see as lavish or frivolous being dinged onto themselves.
Do we need a full-out inquiry into money laundering in BC?
That's a great question, and usually inquiries are long and expensive, but this story is not going away. These allegations are not going away, and really there's probably no other way to do it. There's probably no other way of doing it other than having a full inquiry. Again, headed up by somebody that Canadians trust and somebody who has experience in this. Preferably, again, somebody from outside of the province. Because the allegations that are involved with this huge, huge story are multi-tendrilled. And so it's probably best to bring in an independent person from outside of British Columbia, so pick a jurisdiction, Manitoba, Ontario, wherever. And yeah, it sounds like we are now heading towards an inquiry. And it seems like that's what most British Columbians would rather do. I haven't seen any recent data or polling on that, but it seems like every 10 days or so, we're hearing another report or hearing another example or seeing another good piece of journalism by a reporter digging these things up. So in order to actually get everything out into the open, then yeah, you probably do need to have an inquiry.
And should we have some kind of an inquiry or investigation where instead of just saying, yeah, those people did something wrong, but then nothing happens to them, go after the illegally gotten gains? Do it some way that you can do that.
Usually, when there's an inquiry, some of that testimony or evidence that is then uncovered can be admissible to law and authorities. So it all depends on what kind of information is garnered from those inquiries. And then I think it's just up to law enforcement officials to decide to act on that evidence or not. So you could quite easily, I imagine, hand it over to legal experts. But again, I'm personally not a legal expert, but it's my understanding that if criminal wrongdoing or allegations or evidence of criminal wrongdoing are uncovered under any public inquiry, that could be admissible for law enforcement.
We'll have more with Kris Sims right after this.
Hi, I'm Douglas Mason, President and CEO of Magnum Gold Corp, MGI and the TSX Venture Exchange. A 2015 drill program on the LH property intersected several high-grade gold intersections, including 11 meters of 20.66 grams per ton gold. Additional drill targets on the LH property have been identified by a 2018 drone airborne magnetic survey to further evaluate a pyrrhotite enriched gold-bearing system. Please visit our website at magnumgoldcorp.com.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Kris Sims. Kris, British Columbian homeowners are now getting mailed invoices saying that they owe money as speculators in real estate unless they can prove otherwise, a negative billing option for taxes. Is this just an outright tax grab, and are they hoping people won't notice these forms or know the law?
This is very problematic, and it's one of the reasons why we were opposed to the speculation tax from the get-go, because we were worried that it wouldn't do anything to improve housing affordability in British Columbia, and that somehow the government would mess it up in the way that it rolled it out. Because whenever reporters were asking members of this government, how are you going to apply this, the answer was vague. Well, negative billing, that really goes past the comfort level for a lot of people. And the idea that the number that I saw floating around was that the government estimates that there's around 30,000 people who hold property in British Columbia that is a secondary property and is left unrented. So really what they're trying to do is have a vacancy tax on British Columbian properties. They're guessing that it's around 30,000, yet they're sending apparently 1.6 million homeowners this notice of, you are going to be deemed a speculator until proven otherwise. Thank you very much. Here, do 20 minutes of paperwork. And the risk of mistakes is huge. There are folks who will see this envelope come through and think it doesn't apply to them because they lived in their house for 20 years and they're obviously not a speculator, and boom, in the recycling bin it goes. Or there could be somebody who is living down south in Arizona or Florida for a few months of the year, and they won't see this, they won't get it, and they're automatically bumped up into a big, big tax bracket based on their property. Again, huge problem. There can be people who just won't understand how to fill this out, or who fill it out incorrectly and then try to get a hold of the finance department. And then in the meantime, they're being billed this extra tax, and the government is promising to have it repaid to them within 6 years. 6 years if they make a mistake? Again, this is just, it's a disaster waiting to happen. And so the idea that you're automatically labeling a huge majority of BC property owners speculators by default until proven otherwise is really unfair. And they really need to reverse this.
Isn't this against the Charter of Rights where you're considered innocent until proven guilty?
This is one of the things, right? And this is why I think it really feels that it's unfair for people. Common sense people don't want to be accused of something. And if they're simply a homeowner and they're getting this in the mail, this is really going to upset a lot of people. And again, why are they casting such a massive net over 1.6 million property owners in order to quote unquote catch around 30,000 of them? And further, if this is about housing affordability, if this is about supply on the rental market, and I get it, finding a place even to rent in especially the Lower Mainland is next to impossible. I get it. but if this is what this tax is for, do we really think that our theoretical multimillionaire who might live overseas and owns multiple properties in British Columbia, so much so that he or she doesn't even care enough to rent them out because they can afford to take the loss and take the hit, do we think that person cares about a 0.5% or a 2% tax? They won't care. This won't force them to put their property on the market. This is bizarre. The idea that they're trying to apply this in order to loosen up the rental market just doesn't make any sense. That multimillionaire boogeyman out there who might own these properties won't care about this extra tax because they can afford to absorb it.
Well, this is going to go after less than 2% of the homeowners.
Yeah.
Now, isn't all this information already available to the government through the land registry and the voter registration?
You'd think that they would be able to simply cross-reference those two deep data mines and apply it and then send these letters out to those folks. Because otherwise, where did they come up with their estimate that about 30,000 properties like this exist in British Columbia? Did they just pick that out of the sky? Or did they actually bother to cross-reference between the property data center that they have access to and, you're right, the voter registration, or income tax or any of the other records that government has on us? Why are they now getting BC homeowners? And remember, it's everybody on the property. So yourself, your spouse, your adult child, whoever it is, you will need to fill this out every single year, just in case you automatically became a speculator somehow within the last 12 months, over and over again. So again, the rollout and the application of this has got a lot of people scratching their heads.
Well, it's a brand new bureaucracy then, which means another costly item for taxpayers to support.
Just think, too, of all of those people who are now sending out the letters, of how much that is going to cost, even in something as simple as postage. That's a lot of letters. That's a lot of money. And now just think of the fraction of the percent of people that might have a problem with this form, or not understand it, or need to ask questions about it, or need to dispute it, or need to appeal it. How many new government employees has the finance department hired to handle that flood of phone calls and emails and letters? Have they hired any new hands on deck? How much are we paying for those people? Again, the moment you allow government, big government, to grow bigger, it needs more money to sustain itself. Because as they hire more bureaucrats, they need to pay those people. And the only place they get to pay for those people is through us. It's through taxes.
I'm sure they're hoping the speculation tax might cover it, or are they hoping that? Or do they? It seems to me they just want to punish anybody who seems to be getting ahead.
And this is the thing where I find a lot of people that are contacting us now feel like they're being punished or attacked because they own property, or because they managed to have been fortunate enough to own their home. In some cases, maybe they even bought the thing back in the 70s and 80s when you could actually imagine affording such a thing. And I find a lot of people now feel like the government is overreaching itself, and that they don't respect private property, and that they think that the property owners are simply there to be milked of their money, and that they won't complain about it. And you know what? Maybe it's a smart media move on behalf of the government, because maybe there are so many people who are now struggling to pay rent that they won't have the public sympathy or support for actual homeowners and property owners. But at the end of the day, one, the government could easily come after their dwelling and their home next year based on its value. And two, even if they're renters, if the government is overtaxing the people who own that property, the landlord will pass on those expenses in higher rent.
Well, that's exactly what I was thinking is, if you're charged the speculation tax, it's your renters are going to pay for it.
Right? And that's the thing. And if you're accidentally charged the speculation tax, your renters will have to pay for it until you can get the money back. And then you need to hope that they drop the rent again next year when it all gets sorted out, because technically the speculation taxes are not supposed to be paid on property that you are renting out. That's the rationale. If you're renting it out, you're supposed to be exempt from the speculation tax. And now, there you go. Another whole new level of paperwork. Do your tenants, do your renters now need to fill out this form saying, yes, I do actually live here? It's just going to be a mess.
Kris, thank you so much for chatting with us.
Thank you so much for caring about these BC issues. It's a very troubling time for taxpayers.
My guest has been Kris Sims, BC Director of the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. You're listening to the Goddard Report on TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Find us on Twitter at TalkDigitalNet, our YouTube channel, Talk Digital Network. If you have questions for Kris or any of our other guests, you can send them to info@HowStreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thanks for listening.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of How Street Media Incorporated.